A few years ago, while wandering through a remote village in coastal Karnataka for a research assignment, I stumbled into a community that I didn't fully understand at first. An entire crowd sat in front of a makeshift screen, watching a film. The projector flickered softly, fans creaked overhead, and the air smelled of incense and wet earth. As I stood in the back, something strange struck me. People weren't reacting to the movies as entertainment. They responded as if they were watching a memory, a ritual, a part of themselves. An elderly man noticed my confusion and whispered, "For us, this is not cinema. This is the truth we live." That single sentence lodged itself in my mind. In India, mythology is not a distant archive. It slips into daily life, rituals, monsoon nights, and the way stories are passed from elders to children. And cinema, when handled with respect, becomes one of the most powerful ways to preserve these living mythologies. Since that day, I watched countless films that tap into India's mythic pulse. But five of them stand apart. Not because they're grander or more spectacular, but because they blend mythology, the real world, so naturally that the line between belief and narrative completely disappears. These are the films I keep returning to, the ones that make mythology feel alive. Indian mythology is layered. It lives in forest rituals that trace back centuries. It hides in regional folklore whispered around fire pits during monsoons. It plays inside household stories that entertain us as much as their own. It reinvents itself through modern storytelling, and at its peak, it rises into an epic narrative that shape how generations think about morality, destiny, and loyalty. The five films in this list form a journey across India's mythological imagination. We begin with a living ritual that still governs ecological and spiritual life in coastal villages. From there, we descend into a forgotten deity rooted in fear and caution. We then move to a playful household spirits that have influenced childhoods for decades. After that, we witness a modern Malayalam film crafting a new myth for contemporary audiences. And finally, we stand face to face with one of the greatest epics ever written, reimagined through Tamil cinema with a raw emotional force. Each film touched me in a different way. Each one carries a piece of India's mythic landscape, and together they show how mythology continues to shape the soul of this country. Let's begin. Welcome to Mythlok, where legends breathe, gods awaken, and the echoes of forgotten worlds return to life. I'm Nitin Nair, and each week we journey across cultures and centuries, exploring the myths that shaped our world. And don't forget the truths they still whisper today. Because here at Mythlok, every story connects us, one legend at a time. Number one, Kantara, a legend, the living ritual of the Devas. My first experience with Kantara wasn't in a theater. It was in that coastal village, watching people react to the film as though it was documenting their everyday life. When the Bhutakola sequence began, a hush fell over the crowd. It wasn't admiration for choreography, it was reverence. I remember thinking, this is not myth as storytelling, this is myth as identity. Kantara draws from the Tulu speaking region's ancient practice of Bhutakola, a ritual performance where trained mediums embody devas, ancestral spirits who protect land and community. Among these devas, Panjurli, the bow spirit, is one of the most revered. People genuinely believe Panjurli guards their forests and blesses justice and maintains balance. This is living mythology passed through generations without ever needing scripture. What Kantara does so beautifully is present Bhutakola not as a fantasy, but as a lived experience. The Deva is not a CGI spectacle, he's a human channeling divine presence through trance, dance, and ritual. The land dispute at the center of the story reflects the real conflicts between indigenous communities, forest lands, and modern governance. When Guliga's presence erupts in the climax, it's not the supernatural that moves you, it's the emotional truth of a community's faith in their guardian spirit. Kantara sparked nationwide dialogue about indigenous traditions, ecological stewardship, and spiritual identity. For many viewers, it was their first encounter with the world of Daiva worship. For communities who practice Bhutakola, it was a validation of a spiritual system outsiders rarely understand. Kantara reminded me that mythology isn't always ancient. Sometimes it walks barefoot in villages, dances in the night, and breathes through tradition. Number two, Tumbbad, a forgotten deity and the myth of greed. I watched Tumbbad on a rainy night, and I don't think I could have chosen a more appropriate atmosphere. The film felt like a monsoon dream, dark, relentless, and dripping with old secrets. When it ended, I couldn't shake that feeling that I'd stumbled upon a myth that had been buried for centuries, waiting for someone brave enough to dig it up. Tumbbad centers on Hasta, a forgotten deity from Maharashtrian folklore. Hastar is said to be the first child of the goddess, cursed for his greed and contempt to eternal hunger. He is not a god worshipped or celebrated, he is a warning. His myth reflects an ancient belief. Unrestrained desire brings ruin. Stories of forgotten gods, hidden shrines, and dangerous boons exist across India, but Tumbbad brings its obscure deity into spotlight with artistic precision. Instead of leaning into the spectacle, Tumbbad grounds its mythology in generational human behavior. The decaying mansion, the endless rain, and the secret vault all serve as metaphors for a curse born not from divine punishment, but from human greed. The horrifying beauty of Hasta's portrayal lies in its restraint. He is neither a demon nor a god, just a symbol of desire gone wrong. By embedding the myth in a family saga, the film amplifies its message. Greed is hereditary when unchecked. Tumbbad marked a turning point in Indian mythic cinema. It proved that folklore could be philosophical rather than fantastic. The film became a metaphor for colonial exploitation, economic hunger, and the moral decay that comes with obsession. More importantly, it revived interest in local myths that never reached mainstream discourse. Tumbbad taught me that mythology doesn't always illuminate, it sometimes warns. Number 3. My Dear Kuttichathan, the playful spirit of Kerala's childhood. If you grew up in Kerala, Kuttichathan was more than a movie character. He was practically a childhood companion. When I rewatched the film as an adult, I realized that it captured something rare. A mythic being woven seamlessly into domestic. The nostalgia is powerful, but the folklore behind it is even richer. Kuttichathan emerges from Kerala's Chathan lore, a tradition filled with mischievous spirits who exist somewhere between trickster guardians and household troublemakers. Unlike terrifying specters from Western storytelling, Chathans are ambiguous. Sometimes they help, sometimes they teach you hard lessons. They reflect a deeper cultural idea that the supernatural is not always distant. It can live in the same house, influence behavior, and shape moral understanding. This film humanizes Kuttichathan by making him a curious, childlike figure than a fearsome entity. His magic isn't about power, it's about consequences. Every mischievous act has a moral undertone. The 3D technology created a spectacle, but beneath the fun lies the essence of Chathan folklore. Spirits are extensions of human beings, mirroring our fears, temptations, and innocence. My Dear Kuttichathan is iconic not just for being the first ever 3D Indian film, but because it preserved a regional folklore in a way that children could embrace without fear. It remains one of those rare films that brought a local myth to national attention while still being intimate, familiar, and deeply rooted in Kerala's spiritual imagination. For many of us, Kuttichathan didn't just entertain, he shaped our understanding of invisible worlds. If you're enjoying this story, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Mythlok. It's a simple click, but it keeps the flame of mythology alive, helping us share these timeless legends with seekers from around the world. Number 4. Loca, Chapter 1, Chandra. When I watched Loca in a packed Shornur theatre, the energy was electric. I realized quickly that this wasn't typical Malayalam cinema. It felt like the birth of something new, something that belonged to Kerala, yet something entirely global. As the story unfolded, I found myself thinking, Malayalam cinema is entering its own mythological era. Loca draws heavily from Kerala's folklore, especially stories of yakshis, immortal spirits, and bloodline curses, and most importantly, ancestral guardians. Chandra's character, who is revealed to be Kalyangat Neeli, connects a long-standing tradition of female spirits associated with justice, vengeance, and liminal existence. These myths are not obscure. They are a part of Kerala's cultural bloodstream, found in songs, rituals, and legends passed down through generations. What makes Loca special is how it blends folklore with a superhero format. Chandra lives in a modern world, but her identity is shaped by ancient bloodlines, spiritual abilities, and the weight of ancestral responsibility. The film's use of the traditional dialect Morika is a blend of tribal imagery with neon-lit action sequences, and Jake Bijoy's atmospheric score all bridge myth and modernity. Chandra doesn't fight villains. She fights the corruption of an entire system, just as mythic guardians once protected villages. Loca became a cultural phenomenon because it offered Malayalam cinema its first myth-based superheroine. It created a platform for future films in the Loca universe and proved that regional mythologies can evolve into large cinematic worlds. Chandra is not just a character, she's the beginning of a modern Kerala myth crafted for generation seeking heroes rooted in their own cultural memory. Number 5, and my personal favorite, Thalapathi, Mahabharata retold through human fire. I revisited Thalapathi late at night when the world was quiet and I could give it my full attention. The film struck me like a memory of the Mahabharata told through human breath instead of divine words. I realized that I wasn't watching a movie. I was watching the Karna story unfold in modern skin. Thalapathi is a reinterpretation of the bond between Karna and Duryodhana, one of Mahabharata's most emotionally complex relationships. Karna's abandonment at birth, his lifelong search for belonging, and his unwavering loyalty and his tragic moral dilemmas form the backbone of the epic. In the film, Surya or Rajnikant becomes this Karna figure, born into hardship, rejected by society, yet burning with dignity and righteousness. Devraj or Mammootty becomes the Duryodhana equivalent, powerful, ambitious, morally grey, yet deeply human. What Maniratnam achieves in Thalapathi is extraordinary. He strips away the divine architecture of Mahabharata and rebuilds it using social structures, poverty, crime syndicates, political power, caste hierarchies, and the unspoken rules that govern society. Ilayaraja's score becomes a mythic heartbeat, turning ordinary alleys and bridges into battlefields of destiny. When Surya and Devraj swear loyalty, it feels like the echo of an ancient vow. When they part, it feels like Kurukshetra happening in slow motion. The film stays true to the myth's emotional DNA: loyalty, fate, righteousness, inevitable tragedy, etc. Thalapathi remains one of the most respected myth-inspired films in Indian cinema. It proves that epics don't need celestial visuals to feel divine. They need emotional truth. And Surya's arc mirrors Karna's nobility. Devraj mirrors Duryodhana's charisma and downfall. The final confrontation feels as predestined as Mahabharata itself. Thalapathi taught me that mythology does not fade, it adapts, breathes, survives, and reminds us that human nature is still wrestling with the same questions asked thousands of years ago. Across these 5 films, mythology takes 5 distinct shapes. In Kantara, it walks among the villagers protecting the land. In Tumbbad, it warns quietly from the shadows. In My Dear Kuttichathan, it becomes a playful friend who teaches subtle lessons. In Loca, it evolves into a modern guardian standing against corruption and chaos. And in Thalapathi, it takes the form of human loyalty, destiny, and moral fire. Together, these films reveal that mythology in India is not a relic. It's a river, shifting forms, adapting to its surroundings, and moving through forests, homes, city streets, and even futuristic worlds. And cinema, when done with respect, becomes the vessel that carries the river forward. What if ecological wisdom in rituals like Bhutakola guided how modern India protected its forests? What if forgotten deities like Hastar were studied not as monsters, but as symbolic warnings about human nature? What if household spirits like Kuttichathan were revived in new stories that blend morality with wonder? What if modern myth-making like Loca shaped how young Indians imagined their heroes? What if films like Thalapathi were used to teach epic ethics in a way that feels alive rather than ancient? Think about it and let me know in the comments below. The myths we share are more than just stories. They are reflections of who we are and the reminders of what still connects us. I am Nitin Nair and this has been Mythlok. Until next time, stay curious, stay mythical. Once again, thanks for watching Mythlok. Choose your next video below and keep exploring the stories that shape the world. Remember, stay curious, stay mythical.